3 men attacked the Mafia boss. But the waitress wasn't just a waitress. The air in the blue lantern was thick as velvet, smelling of old bourbon, time-smoked duck, and the metallic tang of a saxophone holding a high C. Outside, the fictional city of Harborview pressed its damp Pacific fog against the brass-framed windows. Inside, Rowan Calder, proprietor of the jazz club and the unofficial anchor of the city's gray economy, hosted his annual culinary fundraiser. The clink of glasses was punctuation for the murmur of old money and new ambition. Rowan watched the room, his presence a quiet weight. He registered the entrance of 3 men before his security did. They didn't fit. It wasn't just the suits, which were a size too large in the shoulders to hide the rigid bulk beneath. It was their walk. It was out of rhythm with the jazz, a clipped, discordant tempo. They moved like men accustomed to concrete, not plush carpet. Across the room, Sable Hart felt the shift before she saw it. She was refilling a water glass, her movements economical, her face a mask of polite invisibility. But her senses were wide open. She caught the details the diners missed. The man nearest the bar had calluses high on his inner wrist, where a strap, not a watch, would rub. The man in the middle, the leader, had a breathing pattern that was slightly off, a shallow intake under his left armpit, as if accommodating something hard pressed there. And beneath the cloying scent of cheap peppermint gum, she smelled it, the faint, acrid bite of gun oil. The leader nodded, the room's tempo fractured. The first man moved toward Rowan's table. He was fast, but Sable was already in motion. She wasn't a waitress. She was an equation. She didn't scream. She didn't reach for a knife. She grabbed the pastry chef's butane torch from the dessert cart. With a click and a whoosh, a foot-long jet of blue flame erupted, aimed not at the man, but at the ice sculpture beside him. The heat hit the cold, and a wall of steam and vapor exploded outward. The man flinched, blinded. In that half-second, Sable dropped the torch and seized the heavy CO2 soda siphon. She depressed the lever, unleashing a pressurized blast of icy gas directly at his face. He choked, a cloud of frigid white obscuring him. Before the vapor cleared, she was on him, bringing the heavy silver tray she'd been carrying down like an axe, not on his head, but on his collarbone. The crack was sickeningly dull. As he folded, she didn't stop. She pivoted on her heel, a dancer's grace, and drove her hip into his center of gravity, a clean, rotational takedown that sent him crashing into the dessert cart. The second man, stunned by the sudden violence, fumbled for his weapon. He was pulling a snub-nosed revolver from his jacket when Sable struck him. Her fingers, stiffened, jabbed deep into the vagus nerve cluster below his ear. His breath hitched, his entire body seizing in a silent, electrical short circuit. His gun hand went limp. She grabbed the thick velvet rope from a service stanchion, looped it once, twice, around his wrist with practiced precision, and yanked. The man, still paralyzed by the nerve strike, was dragged forward as Sable pulled the entire heavy drape of the main window down, a wall of dark red velvet collapsing over him, shielding the screaming patrons from the threat. The third man ignored her. His target was Rowan. He wasn't shooting, he was grabbing. He lunged across the table, his hand closing on Rowan's arm, trying to haul him toward the service exit. Abduction, not assassination. Rowan reacted, bracing himself, but the man was strong. Then, the heavy brass and wood revolving door to the kitchen slammed open, pushed hard from the other side. It struck the kidnapper square in the back, shattering his grip on Rowan and sending him staggering. Rowan didn't wait. He grabbed the nearest weapon, a $90 bottle of Malbec, and brought it down on the man's exposed temple. The bottle didn't just break. It imploded. The man dropped like a stone. The main lights died, plunging the room into chaos, in the dark. A single gunshot finally rang out, deafeningly loud. It wasn't from the attackers. It was a warning shot from Rowan's delayed security, finally breaching the room. The bullet tore through the darkness and punched a hole clean through the club's neon logo. a stylized heron in flight. Then came the alarm, a piercing, insistent shriek. Sable, in the split second she'd slammed the kitchen door, had simultaneously stomped her heel onto the silent floor plate trigger. The room emptied in a stampede of silk and panic. Rowan's own security team, the best in the city, was only just now pouring in from the lobby, their faces grim. The main elevator had been jammed, locked down, an inside job. The thought chilled Rowan more than the attack itself. His eyes cut through the smoky, strobe-lit darkness, searching. Not for the attackers, for the waitress. He found her, but she was already gone. A shadow disappearing down the back service corridor. She hadn't run in panic. She had executed a tactical retreat. Rowan saw the whole sequence in his mind, clear as day, the torch, the siphon, the nerve strike, the curtain, the door. A civilian bumbling through a crisis might do one of those things by accident. A professional did all of them on purpose. Sirens wailed outside. The urban wardens, Harborview's finest, were pulling up. Rowan waved his team off, letting his lawyers handle the official narrative. He preferred the shadows. He walked toward the kitchen, the scene of the final takedown. Sable was nowhere to be seen. But on the polished floor, almost hidden by the folds of the fallen curtain, lay a single, small piece of black nylon. It was a cut zip tie, looped and pulled into a perfect figure-8 knot, a field expedient restraint, a soldier's knot. Rowan stood in the darkness of his kitchen corridor, the air still biting cold from the CO2 blast. The woman was not a waitress, and her actions tonight, her impossible, violent competence, had just pulled the pin on a grenade he didn't even know was in the room. The door she had opened wouldn't be closing. Sable Hart moved through the pre-dawn streets like a ghost. Her waitress uniform swapped for dark cargo pants and a nondescript jacket. Her short-term rental apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up, chosen for its anonymity and its proximity to 3 different bus lines, mapped out on the wall above a bare mattress. The room smelled of dust and the faint, coppery scent of the harbor. She locked the door with 2 separate deadbolts she had installed herself, her movements fluid and silent. On the chipped Formica counter, she placed her waiter's watch. It looked cheap, but it was heavy. She twisted the bezel 90 degrees counterclockwise, and the face popped open. Inside, there was no clockwork, only a micro drive. She plugged it into a slim reader, her face illuminated by the glow of the data transfer. From a slit in her shoe's insole, she removed a thin piece of laminated plastic. It was an identification card, faded and slightly warped. The photo showed a younger, harder version of her face. The insignia was an eagle clutching a key, superimposed over a fractured map of the world. Continental Risk Authority, below it. The departmental seal, Shadowline Office, a unit that officially no longer existed, a unit that had been decommissioned, its agents scattered or buried. There was a soft thud at her door, not a knock, something placed. Sable muted her screen. She drew a thin, carbon fiber blade from her sleeve, moving to the door with no sound. She waited 1 full minute, listening to the building breathe. Nothing. She checked the peephole. She had reversed a tiny fiber optic lens that let her see the floor outside. A small, brown paper package sat on the mat. She spent another 2 minutes checking for tripwires or pressure sensors before finally opening the door and retrieving it. Inside was a tarnished, Zippo-style lighter. Etched onto its surface was the delicate, unmistakable outline of an orchid, her old unit's call sign. Her blood went cold. She snapped it open. Instead of a flint, a tiny, folded piece of paper was tucked inside. She unfolded it. The message was 5 words, typed on an old-fashioned ribbon. "Don't interfere. Orpheum is watching." Miles away, in the soundproofed media room beneath the blue lantern, Rowan Calder stared at a bank of monitors, his face a mask of cold fury. 11 seconds, no, he said, his voice quiet, which was more dangerous than a shout. The main floor, the bar, the lobby. Every camera went into a buffer loop exactly 11 seconds before they entered. Eden Lark, his head of security, stood stiffly. Rowan, it has to be the installers. Helix Meridian. We've been flagging their software glitches for months. Kellen Brandt, Rowan's right hand, the man who ran the numbers and the muscle, nodded in agreement. Helix runs half the city's tech. They're sloppy. This was a hardware failure. Timed badly. Rowan ignored them. His finger tapped a screen on the side. One fed from a secondary system hidden in the climate-controlled wine cellar. The cellar feed didn't buffer. It's raw. Watch. He played the footage. It showed the main dining room from a high, grainy angle. It showed the three men, and it showed Sable. The footage was just clear enough to see her head turn before the men made their move, her body already tensing as she picked up the torch. She wasn't reacting. She was anticipating. She knew, Rowan said. She knew before they moved. Our waitress. He dismissed Eden and Kellen, the suspicion sitting heavy in his gut. He trusted no one. Not his security chief, not his closest advisor. He pulled out a clean, unregistered burner phone and typed a message. It was anonymous, untraceable. Pier 77, Dawn. You saved me. Now talk to me. The fog at Pier 77 was so thick it felt solid, muffling the sound of the water lapping against the rotting pylons. Rowan stood at the end of the pier, a silhouette against the graying light. He heard her approach not as a footstep, but as a slight disturbance in the air pressure behind him. Sable stopped 10 feet away. She wasn't dressed as a waitress. She looked lean, capable, and intensely dangerous. In her left hand, she held a small, high-pressure audible whistle. In her right, a small glass vial of luminol and a sprayer. She was ready for a fight or for a crime scene. "Who are you?" Rowan asked, his voice flat. Sable didn't move. "The person keeping you breathing." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you get," she replied, her voice just as cold. "You were the target. The other two were muscle. But the third man's job was to take you. Why?" Rowan studied her. The cat-and-mouse game was set. They failed, thanks to you. You're not a waitress. You're military, or something like it. Sable took one step closer. Into the faint light, she pointed not at him, but at his collar. "The man who grabbed you. The one you hit with the bottle. He was wearing nitrile gloves. Kitchen grade. Look." Rowan touched his collar. It was tacky. "What is it?" "Glove powder, cornstarch, but look closer." She sprayed a fine mist of luminol from her vial onto his shoulder. A faint, barely perceptible luminescence appeared, and a trace of commercial-grade bleach, not the kind hitmen use to clean up, the kind your dishwashers use to sanitize the walk-in. The man who grabbed you wasn't an outside killer. He was one of your staff, or he had access to your kitchen storage. The inside job, the jammed elevator, the 11-second buffer, it all clicked into place. "Someone in my house wants me gone," Rowan said. "They want you taken," Sable corrected. "That's different and harder. Who has access to your cameras, your staff, and your elevator controls?" Rowan's mind raced. "Eden, Kellen, I'll handle my people." "You can't," Sable said bluntly. "You don't even know who to look at. The person who set this up is smarter than your team. They were watching tonight, and they saw me." "So were you," Rowan countered. "You saw them." A moment of silence hung between them, thick with the smell of salt and diesel. "I need to find them," Rowan stated. "You know how I have resources. You have skills. A short-term partnership. Name your price." Sable stared out at the gray water. She thought of the orchid lighter, of the warning. "Orpheum is watching. My conditions are simple. No senseless blood. My job is intel, not assassination. And your business stays clean of human trafficking and narcotics. If I see either, the deal is off, and you're next." Rowan didn't hesitate. "My business is already clean. I deal in hospitality, information, and security. I agree to the terms." "Good," Sable said, turning to leave, "because you're not just dealing with a traitor in your crew, you're dealing with the people who hired him." Rowan frowned. "Who?" Sable paused, the fog swirling around her ankles. She finally gave a name to the shadow that had haunted her for years. The Orpheum Syndicate, run by a woman named Verity Knox, And you need to understand, Rowan, they don't just kill for hire. They don't want your money. They want data, and they just tried to kidnap you to get it." She stepped back, and the fog consumed her. Rowan was left alone on the pier, the chill of the morning seeping into his bones. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this fragile, unspoken truce was a high-stakes gamble. And he knew, as he felt the faint prickle on the back of his neck, that they were not alone. The third party, the Watcher, was still out there, listening. The rumors surfaced through Rowan's networks like driftwood. The Orpheum Syndicate was making a move, not for his territory, but for the Tally. The Tally was a ghost story, a myth whispered by accountants and fixers, a fully encrypted, biometric ledger holding the unwashed financial paths of every major player on the West Coast. The intel, which Rowan had paid a heavy price for, claimed this ledger was hidden in plain sight in an antique ebony cabinet in the wine cellar of the Blue Lantern. Sable, reviewing the schematic of the club, shook her head. "It's bait. The location is too specific, too loud." "I know," Rowan said, "but it's the only bait we have." The rain began just after midnight, a hard, cold downpour that lashed Harborview and turned the city's neon lights into watercolor streaks. They were in the main office, watching the silent camera feeds, when the attack came. It was subtle. 3 soft metallic thuds on the atrium skylight, followed by the hiss of compressed gas. Small, spider-like drones had attached themselves to the glass, pumping dense gray smoke into the ventilation system. "Smoke grenades. They're flushing us out," Rowan said, moving for the fire alarm. "Wait!" Sable's voice was sharp. "It's a pressurized system. They want us running into the lobby or the back alley, where they'll be waiting." She bypassed the main controls and ran to the utility room housing the restaurant's massive furnaces and air handlers. She didn't pull the fire suppression. She threw the main furnace breaker. The HVAC system died with a low groan, but the emergency protocol for the ovens kicked in. A massive surge of power went to the primary exhaust fans, creating a powerful convection current. The airflow of the building reversed. The smoke in the vents stopped, hesitated, and then began to flow backward, sucked up through the atrium and powerfully expelled onto the roof, engulfing the drones in their own blinding cloud. Rowan was already on his comms, his voice clipped. "Kellen, secure the back gate. Do not engage. Just lock it down. Eden, roof access, I want eyes on those drones. Report." "Copy." Eden's voice came back, tight with adrenaline. Kellen's line just clicked once in acknowledgement. "You're splitting your defenses," Sable observed, already moving toward the cellar stairs. "They're forcing my hand," Rowan retorted. He followed her down into the cool, damp air of the wine cellar. The smell of old oak, cork, and damp earth filled their lungs. Against the far wall stood the ebony cabinet. It looked ancient, imposing. Sable didn't touch it. She examined the floor, the hinges. "It's already been opened. The pressure seal on the door is broken." Rowan pulled the heavy door. It swung open without a sound. The steel-lined vault inside was bare. There was no ledger, no hard drive. Just a single, brushed metal card sitting alone on the black velvet. The card was stamped with a small, stylized U2. "A U-squared key," Sable murmured. "The tally isn't here. This is the key to the tally." Before Rowan could process, an old-fashioned rotary phone on the wall, a hard line that hadn't been active in a decade, began to shriek, its metallic burring echoing off the stone. Rowan snatched it up. "Talk!" A synthesized female voice, cold and artificial, replied, "Data for the person, a fair exchange." "What person?" Rowan demanded. "Check your private dock camera. Pier 9, the night ferry. You have 5 minutes to bring the key." The line went dead. Rowan's stomach hollowed out. He pulled his phone, accessing the feed. His 19-year-old nephew, Theo, was being shoved up the gangplank of the massive, flood-lit cargo ferry, his hands bound. They have Theo. They didn't take Rowan's armored car. Sable grabbed the keys to a beat-up maintenance truck. She drove through the industrial backlots, engine dark, navigating the slick, container-lined roads of the port. They skidded to a stop behind a warehouse just as the ferry's horn blasted, its massive propellers churning the black, fast-moving water of the channel. "We're too late to board," Rowan said, his hand on his weapon. "They're expecting us to be," Sable replied. She was already out of the truck, sprinting toward the end of the pier. The ferry was pulling away, the gap of dark, churning water already 10 feet wide. "Go!" Sable didn't hesitate. She took 3 long strides and launched herself across the gap, landing hard on the wet steel deck, rolling to absorb the impact. Rowan, fueled by adrenaline, followed, crashing down beside her. A high-pitched whine cut through the rain. Drones, faster this time, rose from the containers. "Sensors!" Sable yelled. She jammed the high-pressure whistle between her lips and blew. The frequency was beyond human hearing, a silent spike of sound that instantly shattered the drone's guidance systems. They wobbled, crashing into the bulkhead. One remained, hovering back. Sable pulled the butane torch from her pack, ignited it, and threw the foot-long jet of flame toward the bow. The remaining drone's thermal sensors locked onto the heat source, mistaking it for a target, and zipped away to investigate the decoy. They found them on the stern deck, 2 figures. One was Theo, head bowed, soaked. The other was a large, hovering drone projecting a shimmering, blue light hologram of a woman's face, Verity Knox. Her expression was amused. "Mr. Calder and the persistent waitress." The hologram crackled. "The key for the boy, a simple transaction. Throw the key onto the deck." "Theo!" Rowan yelled. His nephew didn't look up. "Let him go. You have the key." He reached into his pocket. "No." Sable's voice was low, her eyes locked on the captive. "It's a decoy." "Sable, he's right there. I'm not risking—" "Look at his hands," she commanded. "Theo plays guitar, 12 hours a week since he was 9. His left hand should have deep calluses. Those fingers are smooth." Rowan squinted. She was right. The figure's hands were unmarked, a silicone mask. "The key, Mr. Calder. Now," Verity's voice demanded. Sable moved. She ignored the Theo figure and lunged for the drone projecting the hologram, tackling it from the air and smashing it against a steel winch. The image of Verity Knox dissolved into static. The decoy, unmasked, reacted, pulling a blade, but Sable was faster. She didn't fight him. She bypassed him, driving a palm strike to his chin to rattle him, then grabbed his collar and tore the realistic mask clean off, revealing a stranger's face. A follow-up strike to the throat dropped him, choking. "It was a stall," Rowan snarled. A sharp digital beeping started beneath their feet. Sable's head snapped down. Bomb. Time charge. She scanned the deck. Finding the device wired to a cargo winch, it was plastic explosive, wired to a digital timer. It's military grade. The timer read 22 seconds. "Can you stop it?" "The casing is shielded. I can't pick the lock in time." Her eyes darted around the deck, landing on a crate of shipping supplies. "Get ready to jump." She sprinted to the crate, grabbed a heavy-duty stapler and a thick plastic zip tie. She jammed the steel arm of the stapler into the magnetic seal of the bomb's casing, prying it open with a metallic crack. With 10 seconds left, she didn't cut the wires. She shoved the hard plastic zip tie directly into the mechanical gears of the timer itself. The plastic ground against the metal, the gears locked, and the timer froze. It read 3 seconds. "Jump now!" Sable yelled. They dove over the railing together, plunging into the freezing, violent water of the channel. The shockwave of the explosion hit them a moment later, a solid, deafening punch that felt like it would stop their hearts. They surfaced, gasping, 50 yards away as the ferry, its alarms blaring, continued into the night. They dragged themselves ashore near a loading dock, soaked and shivering. Rowan's phone, miraculously, buzzed inside its waterproof case. It was Eden. "Rowan, thank God. Are you all right? Kellen's comm just went dark. He's offline. Rowan, I ran a deep scan on the vault signal. The tally was never there. It was a ghost signal. The real tally. The logs show it's held in the central databank at Helix Meridian." Rowan looked at Sable. the rain plastering his hair to his skull. Helix Meridian, where Kellen has full access, Sable finished, her mind racing. The same Kellen who just went dark, or the same Eden who just happened to find the new location right after we survived a bomb. The suspicion was thick and cold. One of his most trusted people was the traitor. As Sable wrung the icy water from her jacket, her own burner phone, safe in its pouch, vibrated, a single text message from an unknown number. "Don't decode the tally, it eats the decoder." They didn't return to the main club. Rowan had a private study behind the main building, connected to a small, humid glass greenhouse where he cultivated the orchids that decorated the Blue Lantern's tables. It was his only real sanctuary. They were there now, steam rising from their damp clothes in the warm, earthy-smelling air. The rain outside was a silver-gray curtain, drumming on the glass panes. Rowan hissed. Pulling his hand back from the first aid kit, he'd reopened the gash across his palm, a souvenir from the wine bottle he'd used on the third attacker when he'd hauled himself from the channel. "Stay still," Sable said. Her voice was quiet, devoid of judgment. She took the needle and the antiseptic from him. Her hands, which had been so lethal just hours before, were now impossibly steady. He was a man used to command, but he found himself obeying, watching as she expertly sutured the wound. Her touch was clinical, yet the focused calm of it felt like a strange intimacy. "You're good at that," he observed, his voice rough. "I've had practice." She didn't look up. "My former agency wasn't keen on hospital visits." The admission hung in the air, thick as the humidity. Rowan waited. He knew how to listen for the things not being said. "Shadowline office," she finally offered, tying off the suture with a perfect one-handed knot. "Continental Risk Authority. We were the ghosts they sent to clean up after the other ghosts." She paused, her gaze distant, fixed on a white Phalaenopsis orchid. "My last assignment was deep cover, an armed militia cult in the high desert. I was in for 11 months. I was supposed to be extracted before the raid. Instead, my superior sold the asset list, including my name, to a private military contractor. They were waiting for me at the extraction point. It was a burn order. I was a loose end to be tied." "But you're here." "I don't tie easily." She began wrapping his hand with gauze. "I left the service. The agency doesn't exist anymore, at least not on paper. I went invisible, a waitress, a bartender, a janitor. People don't see the staff. They talk over you, around you, through you. It's the best camouflage in the world. I watch, I listen, I stay off the grid. Until my fundraiser," he said. "Until your fundraiser," she agreed, meeting his eyes. The mask was gone. He was seeing the woman beneath. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the rain. Rowan found himself needing to fill it. A strange reversal. "Maeve Calder," he said. Sable's brow twitched. "Your mother." "She built all this." Rowan gestured, not at the orchids, but at the implied city beyond the glass. This territory, the network, the name. She built it on blood, bourbon, and backroom deals. And then she wanted more. She wanted to partner with the cartels. Narcotics, human misery. He looked down at his newly bandaged hand. "I refused. I was young, arrogant. I thought I could make it clean. I cut them out. I sanitized the books. I turned us into what you see today, hospitality, security, legitimate." He spat the word. "I made a lot of enemies doing it. The old guard, the ones who respected her, and Maeve. She just vanished, walked away from Harborview without a word. That was 10 years ago." Sable finished her work, her fingers light on his skin. She pulled her hand back and her own grazed her pocket. She stilled. Slowly. She pulled out the tarnished orchid lighter. She stared at it, her thumb rubbing the etched metal. "They sent me this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The orchid was our unit's symbol. I thought it was a warning from Orpheum, but maybe it was a message from an old ghost." She snapped the lighter's lid open, then shut. The sharp clack echoed in the small space. Things you burn, she said, don't always stay dead. Sometimes they just change. Rowan looked at the lighter, then at her face. The resolve, the vulnerability, the danger. It was a volatile mix. You still haven't told me why you helped me. That night, you had no stake. You could have run. Sable's gaze dropped. For the first time, her composure cracked. Just a hairline fracture. She looked at the rain, not at him. Because the last time, that cult, the burn order, there was someone else inside. An innocent, not an agent. I was ordered to hold my cover, to let them be. Collateral. I didn't save them. She closed her eyes. I ran. This time, I didn't. Rowan felt the truth of it land, heavy and cold. He understood that kind of scar. He didn't push. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement that passed between them. His phone, set to vibrate, buzzed on the glass shelf. He checked the screen. Eden. Go, Sable said, already back in the present. Rowan answered. What? Eden's voice was fast, panicked. Rowan, it's Kellen. He's gone. He used his master keycard at the Helix Meridian Tower 20 minutes ago, the main data hub. He's not answering his comm. He's not answering his phone. We just got a ping. His phone, it's at the Botanical Skywalk. The garden, Rowan said, the name bitter. A public access glass bridge filled with plants, connecting the Helix Tower to the adjacent building. A perfect place for an ambush, or an execution. He hung up, looking at Sable. My traitor just walked into the enemy's headquarters. And now they have Kellen, and they have the U-squared key. Sable concluded. They'll be waiting for us. It's a trap. Then we spring it. I'll go in, Sable said, already shedding her tactical stillness, her mind working. Helix is a tech hub, not a fortress. I'll use the engineering ducts, bypass their biometric scans. You stay here. You hold the exfil route. You're the target. They'll... No, Rowan cut her off. Don't be stupid, Oz, she snapped. This is my world. You're a liability. It's my man in there, Rowan said, his voice quiet but unbreakable. And it's my name on the line. You want me to hold the exfil, fine, but I'm holding it from the inside. If we're sinking, Sable, we sink together. She stared at him, searching for weakness, for bravado. She found neither. She found only resolve. It was reckless, and it was stupid. And it was exactly what she would have done. Fine, she said. But my rules, we get into chaos, we get separated. You feel the panic rising, you stop. You find me, I find you. We look at each other. We take 3 slow breaths. Then, and only then, we act. 3 breaths, Rowan repeated, a strange, solemn pact. I can do that. The invisible thread that had formed between them in the chaos of the restaurant, that had been tested on the ferry, now pulled taut, a lifeline in a gathering storm. Outside, the Harborview fog pressed against the glass. Thicker than a shroud, the first part of the night was over. The real engine of the story was just turning over. The Helix Meridian Tower was a monument of dark glass and cold steel, a fortress disguised as a high-tech campus. The only way into the data core was through an Orphic gate, a black glass scanner that read not just fingerprints or retinas, but the unique Venus pattern of a person's hand. Eden, we're at the checkpoint, Sable murmured into her comm, a pin-sized mic stitched into her collar. Eden's voice replied, a stream of discordant, encrypted noise that resolved into words in their earpieces. The gate is active. You have a 30-second window after the next security sweep. Rowan to your Sable said, now. From a maintenance junction 2 floors below, Rowan jammed a customized signal bleeder into the PCCC, the building's fire control panel. He wasn't pulling a fire alarm. That would bring a full evacuation. He was triggering the automated safety inspection protocol, timed for precisely 19 minutes after the night shift began. Alarms, polite and informational, chimed through the hall. A synthesized voice announced a mandatory test of the fire suppression system. Security patrols, annoyed, began their automated sweeps. The gate's human attendant is moving, Eden confirmed. Sable stepped out. She wasn't just wearing a uniform. She held a thin, semi-transparent film, which she pressed against her face. It was a thermal mask, pre-programmed with the heat signature of a Level 4 technician. In her hand, a stylus of conductive ink. She drew a quick, complex pattern over her own palm, mimicking the vein map of the same technician, and pressed her hand to the Orphic gate. The black glass glowed blue, then green. The heavy magnetic locks thudded open. They were inside. The data vault was a freezing, silent room, the only sound the high-pitched hum of the server racks. "Eden, where?" Rowan asked, his bandaged hand flexing. "Rack 7B. It should be there." Eden's voice crackled. Sable was already there, pulling the main housing. It was empty. Or rather, it held a single, humming black box. Sable ran her own scanner over it. "It's a dummy," she said, her voice flat. "It's not the tally. It's a high-powered transmitter, broadcasting an identical ghost signal. They set bait for the tracker." Rowan cursed, scanning the empty rack. "So it was all a trap?" "Yes," Sable said. Her eyes were moving, scanning not the empty space, but the framework. But they left a signature. Her finger traced a tiny mark, laser-etched into the metal frame, almost invisible. A small, sharp diamond next to a stylized letter L. "Diamond's L," Rowan said, the air leaving his lungs. "Jonah Pike, that's his private mark." "Who?" "The Chief Executive Officer of Helix Meridian," Rowan said, his voice ice. "And my legitimate corporate consultant for the last 3 years." Before Sable could reply, a monitor on the wall lit up. It was a security feed from elsewhere in the building. Kellen, he was strapped to a steel chair, his face bruised, behind him. Glass walls showed the torrential rain and the lights of Harborview far below. The Botanical Skywalk. Rowan recognized it instantly. The room's main speaker crackled, overriding their comms, a new voice, smooth and confident. "Jonah Pike." "Rowan, a pleasure to see you off your usual territory. I believe you have something I need, the U-squared key. Bring it to the Skywalk. In exchange, you get your man, and I'll even provide a clean elevator to the ground floor. You have 2 minutes. The Skywalk was a glass tube suspended 20 stories above the street, a humid, artificial jungle shivering as the storm hammered it. Jonah stood near the center, flanked by 2 men in tactical gear. Kellen was slumped in the chair, shivering. "Rowan," Jonah smiled, "you look awfully wet. Hand it over." Sable stepped forward. She held the small metal card, the U2 key, between her 2 fingers. She placed it on a nearby planter. "Let him go first." Jonah laughed. He took the key and slotted it into a portable terminal on his wrist. "You think this drive holds the tally?" he sneered. "How very quaint. The tally doesn't need an 18-terabyte drive. Rowan, it needs an opener." He nodded to his men. One of them cut Kellen's bonds. "He's all yours." Kellen struggled to his feet, dazed. He took 1 step, then 2, toward Rowan. He stumbled, his ankle twisting awkwardly. He pitched sideways, directly toward the low, ornamental railing of the Skywalk. "No!" Rowan yelled. "It wasn't a stumble. It was a push." Kellen went over the side, disappearing into the screaming wind. Rowan lunged, his reflexes pure adrenaline. His fingers closed not on Kellen, but on the window washer's anchor line still attached to Kellen's harness. The force nearly tore Rowan's arms from their sockets, but he held on, his bandaged hand screaming in protest. Pull Sable was beside him, grabbing the line, her small frame braced against the railing. Her other hand was already holding a small black jammer. Her thumb mashed on the trigger, flooding the area with a high-frequency squeal to disrupt their comms. But Jonah wasn't watching them. He was watching his terminal as the U2 key loaded. "Got it," he smiled. The moment the drive registered, a deep, solid thud echoed through the building. Heavy steel shutters slammed down over the Skywalk exits. The lights flashed red. "Stairwells are locked. Elevators are frozen," Jonah announced, his voice triumphant. "Total lockdown." In their earpieces, Eden's voice returned, but the calm distortion was gone. It was pure, raw panic. Rowan, I'm locked out. I can't override it. My comms, my internal signal. It's matching frequencies with the Orpheum network. They're in my system. They're using my channel. Rowan, his body straining against Kellen's weight, looked at Sable. The blood drained from his face as the realization hit them both. She wasn't our support, Rowan said, his voice hollow. She was their tracker. Sable gritted her teeth, pulling. She's Orpheum's ear, planted in your club to map your habits, your people, and she just cut our only way out. The two guards were advancing. Jonah watched, amused, from behind the lockdown terminal. No way out but down, Rowan grunted, trying to get leverage. No, Sable said, her eyes flashing. Out! She let go of the rope, forcing Rowan to take the full weight. She pointed at the massive, storm-lashed plate glass wall beside them. The 3-breath rule, she said. Rowan, hanging on to Kellen's life, met her gaze. The world was red lights and screaming wind. He let out his breath. 1. She breathed with him. 2. Their eyes locked. 3. He gave a sharp nod. Sable didn't hesitate. She grabbed a heavy, cast-iron botanical trough. Rowan, holding the line with one arm, kicked the base of the window, fracturing the seal. Sable swung the trough. The glass didn't shatter, it imploded. Wind and rain exploded into the skywalk. Hold on, Rowan yelled to Kellen. Sable grabbed the anchor line. Together. They didn't fall. As Jonah and his men shielded their eyes, Rowan and Sable, still clinging to Kellen's tether, plunged through the broken window and disappeared into the storm, grabbing for the wet, metal rungs of the external maintenance duct. Below them, Harborview glittered, a map of drowning stars. They made it to a disused warehouse on the industrial side of the bay, a cavernous space Rowan owned that held the ghosts of his club's previous incarnations, stacks of old, deep red velvet chairs, silent bar taps and rolled-up carpets. The rain hammered on the corrugated tin roof, a deafening, relentless drum. They had gotten Kellen, half drowned and hypothermic, to a trusted doctor before doubling back here. Now, in the damp cold, they were finally alone. An old oil heater in the corner sputtered to life, casting a warm, flickering orange light that fought with the cold blue of the storm outside. Rowan had a long tear in his jacket from where it snagged on the ductwork. Sable had produced a small sewing kit from her pack. She was stitching the thick fabric, her head bent, the needle passing through the wool with quick, efficient movements. Rowan stood, bare-chested save for a thin undershirt, watching her. "Thank you," he said. The words came out stiff, clumsy. For all of it. The club, Kellen. Sable didn't look up, but the corner of her mouth twitched in a tired smile, just balancing the ledger. The silence that fell was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had seen the worst of each other's worlds in the span of a few days. It was warm, like the thrum of a bass guitar felt through the floorboards of a quiet room. She finished the stitch and bit the thread, her teeth white in the dim light. Their coats hung from a rusty nail, dripping onto the concrete. The small heater was losing the battle against the cold. Sable shivered, rubbing her arms. Rowan found a heavy canvas dropcloth, dry and stiff. He draped it over her shoulders, and his fingers brushed the side of her arm. He paused. "Another one?" he asked, his voice low. His thumb had found a scar, a pale, jagged line on her bicep. It was old. Sable's entire body tensed. It was an involuntary, defensive reflex. She put her hand over his, not to push it away, but to stop it, to freeze the moment. "Sable," he started, pulling back. "I'm sorry, She didn't let him. She held his hand, his rough, bandaged, powerful hand, and then, in a move that stunned him more than any of her violence had, she guided it. She didn't move his hand to the scar. She moved it to the center of her chest, pressing his palm flat against her sternum, over the thin fabric of her shirt. Her heart was hammering, a fast, strong, vital rhythm against his skin. It wasn't the frantic beat of fear. It was the steady, thrumming engine of a life lived at full throttle. She was letting him feel her, not her scars, but her pulse. He looked from his hand to her eyes. The space between them evaporated. He didn't lean in. She did. The kiss was slow, hesitant, then sure. It wasn't the desperate, frantic kiss of a movie. It was a discovery. It tasted of rain and salt and the faint, metallic tang of adrenaline. It was a question and an answer in one. His hand moved from her heart to her jaw, his thumb brushing her cheekbone, his bandage rough against her skin. Sable's hands came up to his chest, not to push, but to anchor. She pressed her forehead against his, her eyes closed. He felt her inhale, a deep, shuddering breath that filled her lungs. 1. He matched it. 2. The world outside, the rain, the danger. All of it faded to a dull roar. 3. When she finally pulled back, it was only by an inch. They didn't move away. They found a pile of stacked furniture covers, and in the small circle of warmth from the oil heater, they lay down, side by side, not daring to take off any more damp clothes. He simply put his arm over her, and she curled against his side. He clasped her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. It was not the collision of lust, it was the alignment of two bodies that had been through a storm and were, for a single moment, offering solace. Their eyes held in the flickering light, a conversation passing between them that required no words. A sudden, violent gust of wind slammed the warehouse's loose loading door open. It crashed against the wall with a shriek of metal. In the same instant, they were on their feet. The warmth was gone, replaced by pure, cold instinct. They had sprung apart, landing in balanced, defensive crouches. Sable was already adjusting her shirt, her eyes on the dark, rain-swept opening. Rowan, breathing hard, was already holding his weapon, his body angled between her and the door. Passion and danger fused in a single frame. He stared at the doorway for a long count, listening. Nothing but the storm. He let out his breath and slid the gun back into the holster at the small of his back. Sable, too, relaxed, but more slowly. She ran a hand through her damp hair. "I swore I was done," she said, her voice quiet. "After my last mission, I swore I'd just run. I'd be a ghost, and I'd keep running." Rowan stepped close to her again, but this time, his touch was different. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't reach for her. He gently placed his fingers on the side of her neck, his thumb resting on the pulse point. He felt her heartbeat, still fast, under his skin. "If we have to run," he said, his voice a low promise, "we run together." A harsh crackle of static cut through the sound of the rain. It came from a small, short-wave radio in Sable's pack. They both froze. It crackled again, and a voice filtered, anonymous, synthesized, filled the warehouse. "Maeve will return right on time. Don't let her see you weak. V." Verity. Rowan's blood ran cold. Maeve, his mother. The radio went silent. The spell was broken, the truce, the warmth. It was all over. The larger game had just reappeared on the board. Sable turned from him, her face already a mask of cool calculation. She walked to the small, fogged-up window of the office. She wiped the condensation away with her sleeve. In the distance, across the churning black water of the bay, a single, rhythmic light cut through the storm. With her finger, she drew an arrow in the steam on the glass. It pointed directly at the light. "Breakwater Lighthouse," and she said, "Orpheum's Rendezvous, tomorrow night." The message from Verity changed the equation. Maeve, his mother. The name hung in the damp air of the warehouse, heavier than the storm. "If she's involved," Rowan said, his voice flat, "this isn't about data. It's about succession." "It's always about data," Sable countered, her mind already several steps ahead. She was cross-referencing the Helix data architecture with old Shadowline files on her encrypted drive. The tally isn't a file. The U-squared key Jonah stole wasn't a drive. It's a protocol. It needs a biometric handshake to decrypt, but the file says the encryption is founder locked. Rowan looked up, the realization dawning on his face, cold and dreadful. Founder locked, Maeve Calder. Sable nodded. Verity doesn't just need the key. She needs your mother's living cardiovascular signature to open the ledger. She can't just take the data. She has to have Maeve willingly open it. So Maeve is her prisoner, Rowan said, a sliver of hope. Or her partner, Sable replied, shattering it. Think about it. Jonah Pike is Helix's CEO. Eden was your internal eye. They're just pieces. Verity and Orpheum are the muscle. But who benefits from legitimizing the tally? Not just stealing it, but opening it properly. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Who wants to control the West Coast's Black Ledger? Someone who already controls the public one. A file popped up Harborview City Hall. Mayor Gareth Lyle, and he's been trying to force a civic compliance bill on the port for a year. Verity wants to use Maeve to open the tally, then sell that ultimate blackmail tool to Lyle's political alliance. Jonah gets a clean slate. Eden gets a payday. Verity gets power, and Lyle becomes a king. Rowan was silent, processing the scale of the betrayal. This was bigger than his club. It was for the whole city. We need leverage, Sable said. Not just on Verity, on Lyle, on Maeve. She packed her gear. Stay here. Lock this place down. Where are you going? To the docks. There's a night market for data brokers. I need to find Maeve's ghost. While Sable disappeared into the city's digital underbelly, Rowan made his own move. He sat in the dark warehouse and made a call, one he hadn't made in 5 years. Gabe, it's Rowan. I need you to do the impossible. I need the circuit tribunal. Gabe North was the only clean lawyer Rowan kept. He was a man who believed in the law, even when his clients didn't. Rowan, a tribunal warrant for what Helix Meridian, that's the mayor's pet project. You're asking me to walk into the lion's den with a stake tied around my neck. I know, Rowan said. I'm not asking you to seize the building. I'm asking you to file a preservation of evidence injunction. Digital. We have reason to believe Helix is facilitating interstate financial crimes. We're going to give you the proof. But I need that warrant. I need a legal beacon. Can you do it? There was a long pause. God help me, Gabe said. I'll try. Sable returned just before dawn, smelling of salt water and ozone. She held up a small, encrypted drive. Maeve's digital will, an encrypted dead man switch she created when she first built her network. It's a trap. Rowan, if the tally is ever opened by force, without her specific, real-time biometric consent, it triggers a wipe, not of the tally itself, but of 4 specific, external black funds. Guess whose name is on the 4th fund? Gareth Lyle. She built the perfect insurance policy, Sable said, a note of grudging respect in her voice. She wrapped her entire empire around a bomb that only she could defuse. The aha moment was interrupted by the ping of Rowan's secured laptop, a video file. He opened it. The image was live, time-stamped, the botanical skywalk, but not empty. Verity Knox was there, in the flesh. Not a hologram. Beside her, his face pale and terrified, was his nephew, the real Theo. No decoy this time. Rowan, Verity's voice was sharp. I have the boy and I have the opener. The camera panned. Sitting in a chair, perfectly calm, was Maeve Calder. She looked almost the same as she had 10 years ago, imperious, cold, and in complete control. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes finding Rowan's. The Empire needs a clean hand, Rowan, she said, her voice like ice. You were never cold enough. The feed cut. Rowan felt his knees buckle. It wasn't a kidnapping. It was an invitation. His mother, the ghost, had returned to tear down everything he'd tried to build. He slumped against the wall, the fight momentarily gone from him. Sable watched him for a beat, then knelt in front of him, forcing him to meet her gaze. She's trying to get in your head. It's a psychological play. Don't let her. She's my mother, he whispered. No, Sable said, her voice firm, pulling him back from the edge. She's the founder. She's the target. You can't choose your blood, Rowan, but you can choose your wounds. Are you going to let her give you another one? Or are we going to finish this? He looked at her, the fog in his eyes clearing, replaced by a cold fire. He took a slow, deliberate breath. 1, 2, 3. We finish this, he said. What's the play? A 3-layer plan, Sable said, already on her feet, her voice crisp and tactical. Layer 1, Verity wants a biometric signature. We give her one, I can synthesize a fake cardiovascular loop from the data on her will. It'll fool the tally's sensors for about 30 seconds before it cross-checks and finds the force attempt. That's our window. Layer 2, Rowan picked up, is the tribunal. When the tally opens, Lyle's fund is exposed. In that 30-second window, we need our legal beacon to attach Gabe's warrant. It won't just copy the tally, it will legally seal it as evidence. Live across the entire network. Exactly, Sable said, which brings us to Layer 3. Maeve, Verity, Jonah, they're all there. But who is really in charge? Who is the final puppet master? We trigger the alarm, we expose the data, and in the chaos, we find out who is holding the real strings. We lure them all to the lighthouse, and we make them show their hand. Rowan nodded, the plan solidifying. Eden, she's still a loose end. She's listening. I know, Sable said, a predatory glint in her eye. She picked up a burner phone, and she's about to be a very useful pawn. She dialed a number, one she knew Eden was monitoring, and pitched her voice with just the right amount of panic. Verity, you win. It's Sable. We're burned. Rowan is broken. Maeve. God, Maeve is with you. We'll do it. We'll bring the will drive to the lighthouse. Just let Theo go. We're coming in. We're done. She hung up. In the silence, they both knew. The message was sent, the trap was set, the pawn was moving. The breakwater lighthouse was a spike of iron and stone against the screaming black sky. Wind and seawater spray whipped across the exposed steel platform at its peak, 100 feet above the churning, invisible sea. Verity Knox stood by a complex central console, her face illuminated in its unsettling green glow. Jonah Pike, looking pale and nervous for the first time, monitored a secondary terminal. Eden Lark shivered near the edge, her eyes darting between Verity and the iron stairs. In the center of the platform, his hands bound with soft cuffs to the railing, was Theo, his head bowed against the rain, and sitting on a stone bench, as if attending a quiet opera, utterly serene, was Maeve Calder. The heavy iron door to the platform burst open, slamming against its stops. Rowan and Sable stepped out into the storm. Sable held a single, insulated cryo-vial in her hand, raised so it was visible. Rowan held his hands up, empty, palms out. It was a clear, perfect signal of surrender, designed to make Verity overconfident. "Oh, Verity!" Eden suddenly screamed, taking a desperate step away from the railing. "He's lying, they are setting you up. But I can help. I hated you. You used me, treated me like a common tool." Sable tensed, her eyes narrowing. She did not trust the sudden, convenient betrayal. But she shifted her weight, a subtle repositioning that put her closer to Rowan, and left the path between Eden and Verity clear. Let the snake into the other basket. Maeve Calder laughed, a sound like dry ice scraping stone. "Learn this lesson, Verity," she said, her voice cutting cleanly through the gale. "Never, ever trust a surrender." Maeve, who had been calmly eating a small snack from a lacquered box, suddenly moved. She lunged from her seat, a single, sharpened ebony chopstick held in her fist like a spike. She did not strike Eden. She jammed the blunt end hard against Eden's collarbone, a brutal, shocking push that sent Eden stumbling backward, right over the low safety rail. Eden screamed, her fingers scraping at the wet metal as she went over. She was gone. In a blur of motion, Sable lunged, grabbing a handful of Eden's jacket and hauling her back onto the platform with a sickening thud. Eden lay gasping on the steel, staring at Maeve in pure, animal terror. "Enough games," Jonah Pike snapped, his face slick with sweat and rain. He turned to the main console, the tally's interface. "The key is in. The system is primed. It needs the founder's handshake. Now. Sable stepped forward, holding up the vial. This is a synthesized cardiovascular loop, matched to her known metrics. Sable said, feeding the lie. She did not hand it over. She slotted the vial into the machine's biometric reader herself. The console hummed. The system analyzed the fake, looping heartbeat. For a long, agonizing second, the light stayed amber. Then, it clicked and turned a solid, permissive green. "It is open," Jonah breathed, a look of greedy, manic triumph on his face. The green light stayed on for exactly 4 seconds. Then, the entire platform was plunged into flashing red. A piercing klaxon blared from the console, loud enough to hurt. Red perimeter lights began to strobe, pulsing in time with Rowan's heart. "What is this?" Verity shouted, spinning from Eden. On the screen, a new message had overridden Jonah's controls. Circuit Tribunal Injunction 774A, assets sealed, data mirroring initiated. "The Tribunal," Jonah shrieked, hammering at the useless, locked keys. "How the data? It is locking itself, it is copying." Verity understood. "You!" she screamed at Sable. She ripped an ancient-looking, heavy laser pistol from her hip holster, not a sleek, modern weapon, but a bulky, first-generation prototype. She did not aim at Sable. She fired at the console, blasting the biometric sensor into a shower of molten slag. The data stream stuttered. "Lockdown disengaged," the machine voice said. Maeve, who had not moved, reached over with impossible calm and yanked the primary power cable from the console. The screen, the lights, the alarm all went black. She said, her voice dangerously quiet, "have not given permission." As if her words were a cue, the entire lighthouse shuddered. A deep, mechanical groan came from the water below, followed by the blinding white sweep of a searchlight. A large, black-hulled municipal cutter was ramming the lighthouse dock. "This is Mayor Lyle," a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "We have reports of unauthorized activity. My urban wardens are coming aboard to secure the evidence." The corrupt cops, they were not coming to arrest. They were coming to collect. A dozen men in the black and gray uniforms of the wardens began swarming up the lower steps. Sable did not hesitate. She dropped a small, flat disc onto the wet steel deck. It emitted a low, subsonic pulse that shook the fillings in their teeth. The first wardens to reach the platform staggered, hands clamped over their ears, disoriented and nauseous. "Rowan now!" Sable yelled. In the chaos, Rowan moved. He slammed his shoulder into the nearest disoriented guard, grabbed the keys to Theo's cuffs from the man's belt, and hauled his nephew toward the stairwell. Verity Knox, seeing her entire plan collapsing, seeing Lyle's team falter, made her own move. She grabbed the one person who still mattered. She lunged, wrapping her arm around Maeve Calder's throat and pressing a thin, ceramic blade to her jugular. "Nobody moves," Verity shrieked, "or the tally stays locked forever." A massive crack of lightning split the sky, illuminating the entire scene in a flash of stark white and black. In that instant, a figure stepped from the deck of Lyle's cutter onto the lighthouse dock. He was silhouetted, imposing. "Jonah!" Verity yelled, her voice frantic. "Jonah, kill the signal! Get Lyle up here!" But Jonah Pike was cowering by the dead console, staring at the figure. "That," Jonah stammered, "that is not Mayor Lyle." The figure stepped into the flickering red emergency light. It was Mayor Gareth Lyle himself, flanked by 2 more guards, but he was not the one in charge. A new voice came from the shadows, amplified, carrying over the wind. "Verity, you have been a noisy and very useful distraction." Verity's knife hand wavered. Who is that?" The voice was cold, controlled, and came from the woman Verity was holding, Maeve Calder, with a ceramic blade pressed to her own throat, laughed. "Jonah was a pawn," Maeve said, her voice clear and strong, showing no fear. "Lyle is a tool. I am the architect." Verity Knox's ceramic blade wavered at Maeve's throat, the only sign of her shock. "Architect. What are you talking about? Lyle is the buyer." Lyle is a middle manager, dear, Maeve said, her voice dripping with contempt. She did not seem to notice the blade at her skin. And you, Verity, were just my shopper, a very expensive, very dramatic shopper. You were sent to acquire a key. Mayor Lyle, seeing standing on the cutter's deck, his face a mask of fury, bellowed, "Maeve, stick to the plan. My men will secure the data." "There is no plan, Gareth," Maeve called back, her voice easily carrying over the storm. "Not yours. I partnered with you. Yes, I let you believe you were buying control, but the tally was never for sale." She looked past Verity, her cold eyes finding Rowan, who was shielding Theo by the stairwell. "An empire. Rowan must be controlled. You thought cleaning the books was enough. You thought legitimacy was a shield. It is not. It is a leash. The underworld. Our world. It does not respond to kindness. It only respects power. The tally is that power. The ability to see everything, to control everyone, to force the families to get clean or to be erased. It is the power to judge. A good empire needs a ruthless hand. And yours is the hand, Rowan said, his voice raw. Mine is the only hand, she corrected. Verity's arm, still locked around Maeve's neck, was trembling with rage. You used me. You set me up. You used Orpheum as a sacrifice to draw them all here. Maeve Calder smiled, a thin, chilling expression. Of course, I use everyone. Verity, even my own son. The words hit Rowan like a physical blow. He pulled Theo closer. Taking a step back, the complex web of betrayal was finally clear. His mother had orchestrated everything: the attack on his club, the hunt for the tally, the involvement of Orpheum, all of it just to get all the pieces on the board at the same time. Sable Hart stepped forward, moving from the shadow of the console into the chaotic, strobing light. She was now in the center of the platform, in the sightline of Verity, of Maeve, and of Lyle's men. You're wrong, Sable said, her voice cutting through the wind. Maeve focused on her, the waitress. You are a resilient little thing. The tally is still locked, Sable said, ignoring the taunt. Jonah's terminal is fried, the power is cut. You've brought all your enemies to one place, Maeve, but you can't open the prize. It will open, Maeve said. It will, Sable agreed, but the protocol is wrong. My data from the will was incomplete. She was lying, a desperate, brilliant gambit. The founder lock isn't just one signature. It requires a council, a legacy. It needs 4 heartbeats, Maeve, yours as the founder, Rowan's as the heir, Theo's as the future. And one outsider, one neutral witness to ratify the transfer. Maeve stared at her, her eyes narrowing. She saw the lie, but she also saw the truth beneath it. The console was dark, and Sable was the only one who had come close to opening it. Rowan saw it too. He unlocked Theo's cuffs, pushing the boy gently behind him. Sable, what are you doing? Changing the rules, Sable said. She walked to the dead console. Pulling a small power cell and a bypass tool from her belt, she jammed the tool into the slagged sensor. The system is still live. It just needs the handshake. 4 of us, or no one. Maeve looked at the console, at Sable, at Rowan. She looked at Lyle's men, who were slowly recovering from the sonic pulse and starting to advance. She needed the tally open now. She believed Sable was failing, bluffing, stalling, and in that arrogance, Maeve found her trap. Fine, Maeve said. Open it. She shoved Verity's arm away. Verity, momentarily stunned. Let her go. Maeve stalked to the console. Rowan, Theo, now. Rowan hesitated, then pushed Theo forward. Go. Do what she says. The 4 of them, Maeve, Rowan, a terrified Theo, and a focused Sable stood around the console. Sable had exposed the raw sensor plate. All hands on the plate at the same time. Maeve placed her hand down first. Imperious. Rowan laid his bandaged hand next to hers. Wincing, Theo, trembling, put his small hand down. Finally. Sable placed her palm flat on the metal. It will read our cardiovascular signals, Sable said, her voice a calm instruction in the center of the storm. But it will fail unless they are synchronized. Maeve, you think I will fail, but you forgot the rule. She looked at Rowan. Rowan met her gaze. He looked at Theo. Theo, look at me. Breathe with me. Sable closed her eyes. Now. She inhaled, slow and deep. 1. Rowan matched her. Pulling the air into his lungs, he saw Theo do the same, his panic giving way to focus. 2. Maeve, annoyed, took a sharp breath, but the machine was reading the rhythm. 3. The console, powered by Sable's battery, flashed. The screen lit up. Not red, not green, but a brilliant, pure white. A single word appeared synchronized. The tally opened, but it did not open for Maeve. It did not open for Lyle. The legal beacon, Gabe's warrant embedded in Sable's bypass, triggered instantly. A massive, high-speed data stream erupted from the lighthouse, broadcasting not to Maeve's private server, but publicly, to the Circuit Tribunal's open evidence portal. Maeve's face, illuminated in the white light, turned from triumph to horrified understanding. What did you do? She exposed it. Rowan said, she's not controlling the tally. She's releasing it. The tribunal feed, now live, was visible on the monitors of Lyle's cutter. It showed the black funds. It showed Lyle's name. It showed Jonah Pike's illegal transfers. It showed everything. No, Maeve shrieked, realizing too late. No one controls it. It's turning on all of us. Verity Knox, seeing the data stream, knew the game was over. She threw a small black sphere to the deck. It exploded in a cloud of blinding, acrid smoke. Everyone for themselves. In the smoke, Maeve turned, her face a mask of pure patrician fury. She did not run. She pulled a thin, style-like blade from her sleeve and lunged, not at Rowan, but at Sable. You... Rowan moved, a pure reflex of protection. He shoved Sable aside, taking the blow. The blade's tip laid his cheek open from temple to jaw, a searing line of fire. Sable, knocked off balance, recovered instantly. Maeve raised the knife again for a second, killing strike. Sable didn't counter with a blow. She moved inside the attack, catching Maeve's wrist, twisting her arm in a perfect, contained, reverse lock. The knife clattered to the steel deck. Maeve was immobilized, her arm locked at a painful angle, her body forced to the ground. Sable leaned in close, their faces inches apart. The storm raged, the sirens of approaching. Different ships wailed. There was no hatred in Sable's eyes, just a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Stop, she said. The smoke cleared. The platform was flooded with new lights. Not Lyle's corrupt wardens, but the tribunal's own tactical team, rappelling from a helicopter. Lyle was being cuffed by his own uncorrupted officers who had been waiting for the signal. Jonah Pike, seeing it all, made a dash for the railing and jumped, a dark shape swallowed by the sea. Eden, in a final act of self-preservation, tackled a fleeing Verity, screaming, "I got her, I stopped her." Maeve Calder did not struggle. She stood, her arm throbbing, and allowed the tribunal officer to place her in cuffs. She held her head high, her gaze fixed on her son. "You chose kindness," she said, her voice flat, dead. "The Empire does not need you." Rowan, pressing a hand to his bleeding face, looked at his mother, the woman who had tried to destroy him, and felt only a cold, empty pity. "I do not need the Empire," and he said, "I need my people to live." The storm of the century was followed by the trial of the century. The data Sable had unleashed from the tally was a political and criminal atom bomb. The Circuit Tribunal, armed with irrefutable proof, moved with blinding speed. Maeve Calder, defiant and cold to the last, was indicted on dozens of counts of financial terrorism and conspiracy. Mayor Gareth Lyle, exposed and disgraced, was arrested on the deck of his own cutter. Verity Knox, pragmatic as ever, cut a deal, trading the entire Orpheum Syndicate's global network for a place in the Witness Protection Program. Eden Lark, facing a long, dark future, confessed to everything, her cooperation earning her a reduced sentence and, perhaps, a chance to one day start over. The body of Jonah Pike was pulled from the harbor 2 days later, a final, silent end to his ambition. The Blue Lantern did not survive. It remained dark, a waterfront ghost, for 3 months. When the doors finally reopened, the neon sign was new. The word blue was gone. It was now simply the Lantern House. Rowan had liquidated his mother's empire, the safe houses, the shadow accounts, the gray market holdings. All of it was sold off. He kept only the legitimate businesses, the hospitality, the music. He publicly announced that 51% of all profits from the new Lantern House would be permanently routed to a data victims fund, established to help those who had been blackmailed or ruined by the tally. He had walked into the tribunal's offices and signed an accord, a binding agreement of transparency. He was no longer a boss. He was a proprietor. He was walking a new, razor-thin tightrope, one that satisfied neither the underworld nor the law. But it was his own. Sable, too, had a choice. Her actions had put her back on the grid in a big way. A formal offer arrived from the newly formed Civil Security Bureau. It was a director-level position, a corner office, a substantial salary, and a path back to the life she had lost. She met the regional chief, a man in a stiff suit who praised her unconventional methods. Sable looked at the offer, at the government insignia, at the promise of a secure, predictable future. She slid the folder back across the polished table. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear, "but I already have a mission here." The grand reopening of the Lantern House was not like the old galas. The crowd was different. It was loud, filled with families, musicians, and artists. The air smelled of fresh bread and new paint. Not old secrets. On the stage, Theo, looking confident and whole, played an intricate acoustic melody. His fingers, now properly calloused, moved with a fluid grace. Sable stood at the very back of the room, by the bar, her hands loosely clasped. She watched him, and the old, deep ache in her chest, the one for the innocent she hadn't saved, felt like it was finally beginning to mend. She sensed him before she saw him, a shift in the air, a familiar warmth. Rowan stopped beside her. He didn't crowd her. His arm just barely brushed hers. A quiet signal. A pale, thin scar ran from his temple to his jaw, a permanent reminder of the night at the lighthouse. He was watching his nephew. "He's good," Rowan said, his voice low. "He's healing," Sable replied, not looking away from the stage. They shared a small, quiet smile, the invisible language of two people who had learned to read the world through intuition. Later, as the band took a break, Rowan surprised everyone by walking onto the stage. He picked up the microphone, and the room quieted. "Welcome," he said, his voice resonating. This place used to be something else. Now, it's for this, for all of you. It's a place to be safe from the storm." He looked to the back of the room, his eyes finding hers. "Sable." He held out his hand. A murmur went through the crowd as she, an unfamiliar face, moved through the tables and joined him in the warm light. "A very good friend," Rowan said, his gaze on her, "taught me a lesson in survival, that when the world is chaotic, when the panic sets in, you stop, you find an anchor, and you breathe." Sable took the microphone from him. Her voice was steady, reaching every corner of the room. "3 breaths," she said, slow, deliberate, together. In the middle of the crowded room, he stood next to her. They inhaled. 1. The room followed, a sudden hush. 2. A collective pause. 3. The new ritual of the house was born. The hours bled into the night. The last guests had departed. The staff had gone home. The music was silent. Sable was checking the front lock when Rowan emerged from the back office. They met in the middle of the dark, empty dining room, without a word. They walked together, past the bar, through the kitchen, to the small, glass-walled orchid room in the back. The air was warm, humid, and smelled of earth and blooms. This was where she had stitched his hand. This was where they had first traded truths. He stopped in front of her. He didn't reach for her. He gently touched the scar on his own cheek. Then, his fingers, hesitant, went to her face, his thumb brushing her jaw. The kiss was slow. It was not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss of the warehouse. It was calm. It was certain. It was a foundation. His hands rested lightly on her waist, hers on his chest. Their fingers were open, not clasping, not holding. It was a promise of a long road, one that needed no vows. When they pulled back, their foreheads rested together. Far across the bay, the breakwater lighthouse pulsed its steady, white beacon. It was no longer a warning. It was a signal for safe passage. The storm was over, but the sea remained. Sable locked the front door. Rowan hit the main lights, plunging the room into shadow. Together. They stepped out onto the damp Harborview street. The rain had stopped. From a few blocks over, the faint sound of a lone saxophone drifted on the night air. Rowan's hand found hers. This time, he did not pull back, and she did not let go. The empire was gone. The ledger was sealed. The knot was undone. Love had not redeemed their sins, but it was redefining their future. They had chosen to live. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please comment below to let us know. Share your thoughts and connect with us. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and please like this video. You can also support us further by hitting the hype button, so this story can be heard by many more listeners.